Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Salebox for the 21st of December 2012. My name is TotalBiscuit, rounding up your daily Steam deals. And any other great things that happen to come in our general direction, of course. Don't want to try and restrict it to Steam, but let's be honest, that's where most of you are going anyway. So, the Steam sale began yesterday, and let me reiterate the standard buying protocols. If you do not obey the protocols, then you will be kicking yourself later, because you won't save as much money as you otherwise would have if you'd followed the rules. And the biggest, most important basic rule is this: never, ever, ever buy a game unless it is in the daily deal or it is the final day of the sale. And the reason for that is because the Steam daily deals override the discounts already on the titles. So if there is a discount like, say, 50%, and it goes on daily Steam deal for 75% or even higher than that, and you bought it for 50, then there's no way of getting that extra money off. Can't be done, and you'll feel like an absolute ponce for doing it. The exception to this is when you see a flash sale for 75% off or higher. It is highly unlikely that you will see a better deal than that. If you see it for less than that, the chances are you might want to hold off. Steam has a tendency of repeating flash sales anyway, so if you miss it the first time around, I wouldn't be too concerned. You can pick it up at a later date in the sale. This sale will be running until January the 5th, and they have brought back the vote on the next deal system. Although this time around, they haven't done any of the crazy stuff, which involved getting coal and trading all sorts of other things around to get free games and stuff like that. So it's a bit more of a simpler sale, a little less crazy, and that's probably for the best, honestly. It's nice just to have a sale where I can see the prices and say, right, I want that, done. Don't have to worry about virtual items and all sorts of nonsense like that. There is also one other additional tip that I would give you before you buy anything on the sale. Unless you want to play it right then and there, click Purchase as Gift, not Purchase for Myself. Once you get that menu, there is a clickable option down the bottom called Keep It for Later. Store the gift in my inventory to send later. Now, you can activate that at any time, but what it also means is if you get a little bit buyer's remorse, or if you bought something impetuously and then decided, you know what, actually I didn't want this, or I wanted to trade it with someone for something else, then you actually have it in your gift inventory and you can do that. There is literally no reason not to do this, because it is just the same as buying it for yourself, only you have to click one additional button if you actually want to install it, and then it goes out of your gift inventory and onto your Steam list. So you can save yourself a bit of money that way. You can avoid the curse of the Steam sales, which is actually buying a bunch of games that you didn't really want to begin with and only purchased them because they were cheap. And hey, you might even be able to trade them later on if you don't want them for something that you actually do want. So a little bit of a pro tip. Aside from that, everything is as usual with the Steam sales. The daily deals last for 2 days, 48 hours, but there are new deals every day. So that means that there will be 2 sets of daily deals going on at any given time. So I am going to cover both of the sets of daily deals since I did miss the sale box yesterday. So bear in mind that the first lot on this list will be ending in about 18 hours after this video is posted. So you better get on those quick. The second list are available for around 2 days. Shall we kick it off? Yes, indeed, we shall. So we'll start with yesterday's deals, and we will begin with Wargame European Escalation. This game is 75% off at $10, €11.24 in Tier 1, $9.99 in Tier 2, and £7.49. This is by the guys that made Ruse, and they decided to make a little bit of a more hardcore strategy game, although, surprisingly enough, it's still fairly easy to control and learn. The game is very much about authentic and, in some places, realistic combined arms warfare. It's got a little bit of the Ruse feel to it, but it doesn't have a huge amount of base building and nonsense or anything like that. It really does come down to team-based tactics and getting the best engagements possible with the right kinds of units. If you're into modern military hardware, then you will probably enjoy this very much, since there are an awful lot of licensed and realistic vehicles in this game, and it is primarily multiplayer focused. When I tried the single player, this was on like day 1 of launch, it was pretty buggy. I actually couldn't continue the mission, which was pretty annoying. But I believe that has been patched and fixed since. It has been out since February this year, after all. One other thing I would say about it is that it does have an unlock system for its actual units. There are certain units that you have to unlock with commander points later down the line. However, there are no microtransactions or anything like that. There are also 3 pieces of free DLC available, which is really pretty cool, which includes new game modes for both single player and multiplayer, as well as a few new maps. So, honestly, this one went a little bit under the radar for a lot of people. It hasn't been a game that I've really had the chance to show you in great detail. That is something that I hope to remedy at some point in the not-too-distant future, but it may be worth looking into. If you are going to buy it, of course, then once again, I would recommend that you buy it for multiplayer and not for single player, simply because the single-player campaign really isn't all that great. Scribblenauts Unlimited, 33% off, takes it down to $19.99, €18.74 in Tier 1, $14.06 in Tier 2, and £15.40. Alright, now this is a little bit of a weird one, because currently Scribblenauts Unlimited is unavailable in the EU and the UK until February of next year. However, it is still in the sale. This is really odd, and I believe it's down to the nature of Scribblenauts and the fact that they need to do massive translation. Not that that's an excuse for the UK at all, because last time I checked, we speak English, and we can pretty much handle the fact that there's a couple of extra Z's and missing letters in American spelling. That's actually not that difficult to deal with. But it seems like they very much want to localize this game. I can't honestly blame them. I mean, it is a game based on spelling words from a dictionary, so you kind of got to get that bit right. But you can still get the discount, which is kind of crazy. Now, this is actually the first time I've ever seen this in a Steam sale, so this is probably the cheapest you will see Scribblenauts Unlimited as a result for quite some time. But you never know. I mean, 33% off a game that just came out, like, last month is not a bad deal, especially considering it wasn't that pricey to begin with. And it is a puzzle game involving conjuring things from a magical notebook, and you can type in pretty much anything you want, which will resolve in some rather interesting emergent gameplay and, quite frankly, ridiculous scenarios. If you saw my WTF Viz on it, and I'd recommend that you watch it if you didn't, then you will notice that I actually had quite a lot of fun with it, simply because it's a game that completely and totally encourages creativity, even in the sense that you can actually create your own items and things within the world via an inbuilt editor. That's insane. There's already a lot of stuff going on in the Steam Workshop for this game, so I feel it's got a lot of potential to be very enjoyable and really rather crazy for the next couple of years, or at least until the next Scribblenauts game comes out. So yeah, I would recommend this, and that's a pretty good price for something that was already not that pricey to begin with. I mean, it started off at $30, it's now down to $20, that's not bad at all, and it does have a lot of gameplay in it, and an awful lot of fun if you are a creative soul. If you're not, then please do by all means avoid this game, because you won't be any good at it. The Borderlands franchise, 75% off, or at least up to 75% off. The one you're probably looking at is Borderlands 2, which is in fact 50% off at $30, €24.99 or £14.99. And the rest of the Borderlands stuff is about 75% off, although they haven't discounted any of the Borderlands 2 DLC, so that's a bit of a kick in the teeth. If any of you are looking to pick those up cheaper, then I'm afraid that you will not be able to indulge in that this time around. They are all exactly the same price as they were already. Also, do bear in mind this is the standard edition, which means that you're not going to be getting stuff like the Creature Slaughterdome, or, of course, the Necromancer 5th class that is available for $10 or your regional equivalent. My opinion on this game is one of disappointment. I was hoping for many of the problems of the original Borderlands to be alleviated. I was hoping for more complexity and more features, and the game simply does not actually provide that. I also found it annoying to play with 4 players because all of the enemies became horrendously bullet spongy, and let's be honest, a lot of the missions are simple fetch quest, collect 10 bear asses, and so on and so forth. It is essentially like playing WoW in first person with a bunch of wacky guns and more than the occasional butt joke. It is in some ways a better game than the original Borderlands, but in many ways it's just the same game as the original Borderlands with a different coat of paint. And if that's what you're looking for, then of course, by all means, jump on Borderlands 2. It is an excellent co-op adventure if you happen to be with a bunch of people that really, really like that kind of thing. If you're not, though, and you found the original Borderlands repetitive, then I would suggest that you will not find this one all that enjoyable. If you haven't played Borderlands yet, then the Game of the Year edition is available at 75% off, which includes all of the DLC. And that in itself is definitely worth tackling, although bear in mind that that was also a bad PC port. So caveats aplenty for this one, I am afraid, when it comes to Borderlands. The Hitman franchise, up to 75% off. The one you're no doubt looking at is, of course, Hitman Absolution at $25, 25 euros, or £14.99. The rest of the franchise is there as well, although, of course, that franchise also happens to be missing contracts, which is unfortunate, but there are still, it would appear, some unresolved licensing issues with some music that was used in that game. It's a good price for Absolution, honestly. It's a good discount, especially considering that that game only came out literally a month ago on November 20th. So that's pretty good when you think about it. Wow, half price off that. It is a good PC port, that I will say for sure. The PC version is really, really good indeed. However, I found myself struggling to enjoy the game in the same way that I enjoyed Blood Money. And I would say that if you're new to the Hitman franchise, then Absolution is probably going to be a nice intro to you, because it's less sandboxy than the original games, it's more directed, it's more linear, and it has some pretty nice features, honestly. I'm not going to really argue too much with the disguise system, even though it is a little bit derpy. I mean, there's no way in a million years that cops would recognize every single cop in the city and instantly be suspicious of you. Yeah, that's not going to happen. But what I will say is in Blood Money, disguises were actually a little bit overpowered, so I suppose that's the compromise they came to there, so it's not too bad. But again, I found the levels to be too small, I found the assassinations to be a little bit too directed, too limited in places. There were some examples of where the game did a really good job of providing a nice sandboxy area, but honestly, because of the way that the game works, you are pushed from point A to point B in a way that you weren't in Blood Money, at least most of the time. You were a little bit within Hitman 2, of course, which is also a really good game, but less so than I feel that you were in Blood Money, and even, of course, in Hitman Absolution. You can watch my full video on the subject where I explain my feelings in full on this particular matter, but I would honestly say that Blood Money is the better game. If you are looking to get into the Hitman franchise, play either Silent Assassin or Blood Money. They're nice and cheap at 75% off. They cost less than a burger. Try that one out, and then maybe later down the line you might dip into Absolution if you're really focused on the story of Agent 47. But I have a feeling if you are big into Blood Money, then you will be disappointed by Hitman Absolution, and that seems to be the consensus amongst most people, although not all. Mirror's Edge, 75% off, taking it down to a measly $5, €2.49, £3.24. Great deal for the Europeans, without question on that one. Mirror's Edge is a first-person platformer, essentially. It's about free running, it's about escaping the authorities, and it has an amazing soundtrack. Not a game that I personally enjoyed a huge amount, but that's because I really hate platforming and I'm bad at it. So if you have any desire whatsoever to run across crisp white rooftops, doing parkour and some limited kung fu and gunfighting in order to escape your pursuers, then Mirror's Edge would be a game that you should look into. It's one of those rare games that comes from EA that's actually very much an original IP and an original concept, and we have yet to see a sequel for this game yet. It's one of the more unique games on the sales list right now, and yeah, I would recommend that you try it out if that sounds good to you. For me, that's like the antithesis of things that I enjoy. The only way they could have made it any worse is if they added a point-and-click interface and put a few puzzles in it. Thankfully, there are neither of those things. But one way or the other, Mirror's Edge is a really good title, and that's a great price for it. And finally, the Prince of Persia franchise, 75% off. You can pretty much get any one of these games for $2.49, €2.49, or £2.49. The franchise pack will set you back $12.24, which will save you a grand total of 21 cents. That means don't buy the complete pack, especially bearing in mind that Prince of Persia 2008 is in there. Ooh, yeah, that was a game where you couldn't even die, and where the combat was so laboriously slow, it begged belief. They remolded the prince to look like the member of a desert ska punk band, and overall, the game was not very satisfying for anyone that had played the previous games, because those were pretty hardcore third-person platformers, essentially. There's some combat in those games, but for the most part, the platforming is where those games really shine. As regards to which of these games are good, well, Sands of Time is absolutely wonderful. Warrior Within is not too bad if you can get past the fact that it's got a horrible soundtrack. Two Thrones is okay, although the PC port wasn't exactly amazing. And Forgotten Sands is the latest one, and that's one of the cheapest prices I've actually seen for that yet. Although, do bear in mind that Forgotten Sands has permanent always-on DRM. Yeah, it does. The Uplay system was never removed, I believe, for Forgotten Sands. So if you get disconnected from the internet, then you will have a bunch of fun with that one. If you're just getting into the franchise, then pick up Sands of Time. Simple as that. No problem at all. Pick up Sands of Time and you will enjoy it very much. Or, like me, get really, really frustrated at it because you're terrible at platforming. But Sands of Time is a phenomenal game. It still looks great to this very day, which to me is quite surprising. Awesome, awesome game indeed, and the follow-ups are not too shabby either. But do avoid 2008, please. Please don't buy that. It's so bad. And that brings us on to today's sale, so let us get on with it, shall we? I want to start with the Darksiders franchise pack. Now, this is a little bit deceptive, because what you'd think in this situation is that you go into Darksiders franchise and like, all right, well, I don't really want the extras, so I'm just going to buy the game on its own. And that will be a little bit cheaper than buying the pack. In this case, no. The franchise pack, which is going to make you scratch your head in dismay, is actually cheaper than just buying the game on its own. So you can pick up Darksiders 2, or you can get the franchise pack, which has Darksiders 2 and a bunch of DLC for cheaper. I'm not going to argue with them, you know, that's fine by me. So you get a bunch of extra items, you also get DLC like Argyl's Tomb and the Abyssal Forge and Death Rides and a couple of other things, and that's a really good deal. So that makes it a significantly better deal than what we saw in the previous sale. So if you missed out that time, then this would probably be the time to actually dip into it. As a bonus, the franchise pack also includes the original Darksiders, so there's no way in a million years that this is not worthwhile for the price that they're offering it for. A couple of caveats, however. The PC port has been improved with some additions to the actual options menu. I criticized that deeply when I first looked at the game, and in my opinion, rightfully so, because it was not good at all. However, as I said, they have improved it. They haven't provided the promised .ini file that they were looking to do for editing all sorts of different things. So stuff like texture quality, bad AA, that stuff is unfortunately still around and it may very well plague you. There are, however, some fixes available over on PCGamingWiki.com. That is PCGamingWiki.com. I would recommend having a look at that, and that very well might give you some information about tweaking the game to your liking. But the actual game itself is really enjoyable. It's a nice melding of the original Darksiders, which was kind of like a Dark Zelda, essentially. Some platforming, some puzzle solving, some combat. This time around, they've got a much bigger open world that you can ride around on a horse, so actually it's very much your Ocarina of Time, I guess. And there's a bunch of content in the game. The game's like 25 hours long, plus if you get the franchise pack, you're adding a bunch more hours in terms of DLC. So this is really nice, and it is totally controllable with the keyboard and mouse, I have to say, even though there were some problems with the options menu. And the game also runs well on pretty much anything. You can't really argue that they haven't optimized it well. That's probably, of course, because you're just essentially playing the console version, and that's designed for an 8-year-old system, but one way or the other, it's worthy of your attention. Psychonauts for 75% off. That is $2.49, €2.24, and £1.49. If you haven't experienced Psychonauts yet, then it's a very strange game. It was certainly highly underrated when it came out. Didn't sell very well, but it acquired something of a cult following and is always kind of the poster child of gamers are idiots and don't buy good games. It was made by Double Fine, who have brought you many awesome titles since, and is about venturing inside the mind with some very strange and weird worlds involved. It is a really incredible game for most people. Personally, it's got a little bit too much platforming for my liking, and plus once I ran into the meat circus, I uninstalled the game and had no interest in going back to it. And I think that a lot of people can probably sympathize with me in terms of the meat circus, but it is a very, very unique game. It is definitely worthy of a look. It's getting a little bit old now, but it still works pretty well. You can still play it in widescreen resolution. There's AA, there's VSync. You can even do it borderless windowed as long as you actually use a utility to make that work. Although being a third-person action game, it is recommended that you play it with a controller. If you head over to PCGamingWiki.com, what you'll find on the Psychonauts page is a nice little utility called Psychopad, which can be used to add 360 controller menus and tooltips to the game, and that is worthwhile if you are using a 360 pad. There are a couple of other issues as well as unofficial patches, which I would recommend having a look at, and that is all over on PCGamingWiki.com. Really great game, though, a very unique experience indeed. The Fear franchise pack, 75% off, taking it down 2, $13.71. There's some weird stuff going on in Europe, though, because the pack isn't showing up in Region 1 Europe, but it is available in Tier 2 for €12.96, and then we've got £8.96 for the price in the UK. So a little bit funky and weird stuff going on here. Not really sure why. As to which is the best game from this, well, you know, the franchise pack is a decent price, but the main problem is that the original game is the best game. Yeah? Fear is awesome. Whereas Fear 2 and Fear 3 kind of not so much. Fear 3 is more of a co-op game, and its multiplayer is really quite cool. Fear 2 is alright, but not amazing, and the DLC for Fear 2 is absolutely not worth it. Reborn is a complete waste of time. It's actually about 40 minutes long. As regards to DLC for the original game, you can't actually buy that separately, just to make that even weirder. That's Extraction Point and Perseus Mandate. Extraction Point is pretty good, Perseus Mandate not so much. If you have no idea what Fear is all about, then what you need to think about is a first-person shooter with a lot of survival horror elements in it. In fact, let's just not even call it survival horror, it's just plain horror. But if you buy Fear on its own, then you will also get Perseus Mandate, and you will also get Extraction Point with it. Which means that I would say the original Fear is easily the best deal of the lot. Fear 2 and 3 are not quite as good, they're a little bit more linear, they don't quite have as enjoyable gunplay in my opinion as the original, and the horror scares are very much rehashed over and over again. Fear 3 actually isn't that scary at all, simply because you have this freaking ghost character and all sorts of crazy stuff going on there. But it does have some really unique multiplayer, which I do very much enjoy. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like there's an awful lot of people still playing it, but it might very well be worthwhile picking that one up if you happen to have friends to play it with, because quite frankly, the game mode known as effing run is really fun to do. Plus there's this cool possession mode, which I very much like. The original Fear, though, is a goddamn classic and is well worthy of your attention, but bear in mind, it is quite terrifying. Cue all the comments saying, oh, I wasn't scared at all. Dishonored, 50% off, that's $30, €25, and £15. It's the same discount that we saw in the previous sale, and was also available on places like Green Man Gaming, although all the keys ran out. So it's a second shot at getting this one. This is one of my games of the year. It was number 8 in my games that I enjoyed this year list. And it's essentially a first-person stealth action game, a little bit Deus Ex-y in places, as well as influences of Thief are very clearly being put in there. You are a supernatural assassin, either sneak your way or stab your way or possess your way or do all sorts of other crazy things to your objective, and it is an explorer's paradise. This is a game that you can blast through fairly quickly if you have no interest whatsoever in actually exploring the world. If you do explore the world, however, you will experience a very cool steampunk-inspired Victorian city that you will have a great deal of time romping throughout. So do give that a try. Dishonored is a really great game, and quite frankly, Arcane deserve all the praise in the world for it, and bonus, it's a good PC port as well. There is story DLC coming later this year. Dunwall City Trials is just out and is not, in fact, discounted, but it's just a bunch of challenges anyway. I wouldn't really worry too much about that. SimCity 4, 75% off, takes it down to $5, €2.50, really good deal for that, and £2.49. So, it's SimCity. You really don't need my explanation for that. It's also the deluxe edition, so just bear that in mind. That means it comes with Rush Hour, which was a nice little expansion. This is still one of the best SimCity games, in my opinion. I certainly believe that it's better than SimCity 3000. It's definitely better than Societies. Maybe not as good as 2000 if you happen to be particularly nostalgic for that game, and I certainly am, but this game does kick a fairly serious amount of city creating arse, and with SimCity coming out next year, promising to be an online-only title, it seems like, unfortunately, we may very well not be getting what we want when it comes to yet more single-player city-building action. Still a great game. Still a fantastic game, in fact, and it'll run on pretty much anything. Although, do bear in mind there are a couple of graphics chipsets that are not officially supported, so you may run into a couple of problems there. Just scroll down to the bottom of the Steam page and have a look. There is a list of supported cards. Thing is, like, this game is years old now, so it really should have run on pretty much anything. Wow, it's almost 10 years ago that this game came out. Good-looking game, considering it is that old, and well worthy of your time, and it will suck up an awful lot of it. And finally, the Tom Clancy franchise, which is supposedly between 30 and 75% off. The actual franchise pack is 31% off. Everything else is anywhere between 50% off, which includes Future Soldier, I might add, and 75% off. Now, would I recommend the franchise pack for that price? No, I actually wouldn't. That doesn't really seem like a particularly good deal, because chances are you've got some of these games anyway, so you're also going to get a bunch of stuff that you really don't want, like expansions for the original Ghost Recon. Are you really going to be playing the original Ghost Recon and its expansion packs? Probably not. Also bear in mind that while it does appear like it's a complete pack, it actually isn't. It's missing stuff like the original Rainbow Six and, of course, Rainbow Six Rogue Spear and all of the expansions for that. It does come with Rainbow Six 3 Gold, which is, like, the best Rainbow Six game, in my opinion. It also comes with Lockdown, which is the worst Rainbow Six game, in my opinion, as well as Vegas and Vegas 2, which are really barely Rainbow Six games, in my opinion. They're more modern military shooters than anything else. The pack also contains End War and Hawks, neither of which I consider to be particularly good games. So, as far as I'm concerned, I would avoid the franchise pack. If you want to dip into it, there's a couple of games that are definitely worth your time. The PC versions of Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter 1 and 2 are pretty solid for the most part, and provide a fairly enjoyable experience, although do bear in mind that these are pretty old games. There's also a bug in the original Advanced Warfighter. Potentially this might affect you. In the Steam version, on Mission 5, you can fall through the terrain if you go too far north. Also the same on Mission 6. There is a fix for that, and that is to go to the game installation directory, open up the bundles folder, rename patch.bundle to xpatch.bundle. And that should fix the problem. There's other information available on PCGamingWiki.com, but I did find them pretty enjoyable. The original Ghost Recon games are good, but they are very, very old indeed. They are more of the tactical style of Tom Clancy stuff, and Advanced Warfighter didn't really move too far away from that, although it got rid of a lot of the planning elements that you would have otherwise seen in the older Tom Clancy games. Rainbow Six 3 is easily my favorite game in this entire list. That's absolutely worth getting. If you're looking for a true tactical shooter, that is where you want to go for it. Love that game to death. Really, really good. The Splinter Cell games are alright too, and as far as I'm concerned, unfortunately, one of the best ones, Pandora Tomorrow, is not actually in the list, but Chaos Theory is, which was arguably better, so that's not too shabby either. But overall, a pack that I would dip into, just pick and choose, but I would not waste your time buying the whole thing, because some of those games are not so great. Alright folks, that does me for the day. Thank you very much for watching the sale box. Sorry for not doing one yesterday. I'll be back at hopefully a slightly earlier time tomorrow to bring you updates on the Steam daily deals that will continue until the 5th of January. I'll see you next time.